I believe in giving credit where credit is due. So before we get into the episode, we are going to name our sponsors. So the sponsors of season 4 are Levo Oil. They were gracious enough to give us a home infuser to be able to make some amazing recipes this season. If you are someone who has been wanting to make infusions at home a little bit easier, definitely check out shop.levooil.com and see if there's something you just have to have in your kitchen. In addition to Temperance Home and Bar. I love Melissa. Melissa has been a true sponsor of our show, working on almost every season with us, and I just love her Botanica. Melissa goes above and beyond to ensure that all of her clients leave super duper happy and are in a better spiritual place than when they came. Please check out the show notes so you can follow her on social media and check out her Etsy page. Let's get into the episode. Thank you for listening. You are listening to Tutti a Bruja, and this is season 4, and I am Bex Carlos. So happy 420, happy festivities to all of my cannabis lovers out there. I'm so excited for this season because we're going to talk about some deep ass shit. We're going to talk about the spiritual properties of this amazing plant. We are going to talk about how to heal ourselves using the plant. We're going to talk about recipes. So we're going to kick off the season with a little bit of chaos in the sense of chaos magic. That's right. So on this episode, Larisa Bolivar kicks it off. And let me just tell you, this was not an easy interview to get. We recorded at least 3 different times, this being the third, and this is the one that stuck. Larisa has lived a wild life in regards to working with the plant. She's had some wild things happen in her life, and a lot of those stories will be in her book that is upcoming in the near future, called Normal is a Setting. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let Larisa introduce herself and, get excited for this wild episode. So, you know that chaos magic is something that we work with here. It's just not even because we want to, right? Because the creator of the show, myself, right? I just have a very wild life. And so how appropriate that to start this wonderful season related to this podcast season of cannabis and just all the different properties of this plant, I find someone who really just lives her life and in her purpose around the medicinal properties of the plant, the magical properties of the plant. Thank you so much, Larisa Bolivar, for taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you so much. Yes, chaos indeed. That's probably the best way to describe the cannabis movement and the industry. We are building the fire truck on the way to the fire. And I happen to be one of the people that writes a lot of the policies that helps shape some of the cannabis movement and industry. And so that constantly has me being pulled in multiple directions. And then I run my own business in cannabis and hemp and have been in the space 20 years. And we're in the middle of a significant growth in our business, both of our hemp company and our brand Higher Power Flowers, actually. So this is even more appropriate for our cannabis side, to where we're launching both brands, moving to Oklahoma, and just general chaos.
And honestly, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. And it's funny because there are the lost episodes, because at this point, I think, is this 3 or 4 that we've attempted to record?
3.
Okay, it's 3.
Yeah.
I look at 3s, so this is going to be the one that sticks. But, it's funny because each time I've gotten to learn a little bit more about you. And so you've had a wild ride with cannabis, and it's wild that you are able to come out on the other side still loving and adoring this plant, even though, you were kidnapped. Like, that's wild ass shit.
Yes. Well, it's because of my faith, and cannabis cannabis led me to my faith. It's an unshakable faith. And so, I walk a pretty straight, confident path. And what I do in cannabis helps me do that, because cannabis is a tool for reflection. We know that. All you have to do is just listen to some music to know that. But it does give me a moment to pause and think and strategize and be efficient, but then it also helps me pause and do self-care in the midst of this. But yeah, and to survive really bad situations, enough to get a book written. I mean, it was pretty outrageous, but cannabis is an antiquity, and I don't think that any of us who are on the cannabis journey have suffered any less crazy than I have. Just a variety of different stories. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So I do. I have a book being written on my life and the actual history of the movement in Colorado from 2001 on. From my perspective, when I moved here and started working with Ken Gorman, who is a cannabis or was a cannabis activist. I shouldn't say is because he's passed, but he's not completely past in my mind. He's kind of always with me in this journey. But yeah, I mean, it is. It's just been quite an intense journey. I'm really happy that we finally connected.
In one of the lost tapes, you said this thing that really has stuck with me about the feminine energy of the plant. And it's like, it really truly is. It's healing. And it's wild because sort of after we had that discussion, I thought to myself, like, why do I love cannabis as much as I do? And like, yeah, the feel goods and this and that. But I don't know if you experience this, but I've talked to a couple of other friends and they've like, oh my God, I've never talked this. So the reason that I think that I love cannabis so much is because it makes me a little bit more vulnerable. I'm not someone who cries. I think it's the long line of Mexican women before me
Mm.
that just has ingrained it in me not to cry.
Mhm.
I know that that's a sign of weakness, but whatever. I process my trauma the way I process it. But the thing I love about cannabis is that for a second before everything kind of like numbs out and feels chill, I just want to cry. I just want to sob. And it's like, sometimes, I do let myself cry. I've been a little bit better about like letting that out. But do you experience that? Like before everything really kind of hits, do you ever kind of feel like you want to cry?
Absolutely. And, being Latina and being raised by strong Latina women, and a very volatile white mom, to be honest, I'm very uncomfortable around emotions because of that. So cannabis helps me absolutely get in touch with that and to, I really like crying in the shower. That's another spiritual release because you have water and the cleansing of water. And so I like to get really high medicated, however you want to call it. I don't think, I mean, there's just so many words. Those two really don't do it for me. But, I like to take my sacrament, I guess, if you will, before I shower, and it helps me release and then to think and to strategize in a way to where I can manage through chaos or dangerous situations like I was in. People wonder how I was able to survive something like that. And I mean, the guy fed me somas. That was one way. The other way, I was being held hostage by a cannabis grower. So I had a lot of cannabis, but that was actually kind of restricted for me. I could only smoke so much because I think the guy knew that is such a good escape. The soma, made me pliable, for some pretty bad stuff, but, sexual stuff. The cannabis component is indeed medicine, and it is spiritual medicine. And not just in that situation but in any situation. And I see, like, today I had a really stressful day in terms of business negotiations, and it's just what it is. When you're raising capital, it's probably one of the most stressful things you'll ever go through because people strip you bare. Your business is stripped bare, your rationality is even stripped bare because you're just trying to prove everything to the money maker, the money changers, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word, but you're trying to get the big money and you're trying to show that you're responsible. It's easy to get shaken and doing stuff like that, but I can step back and smoke a joint and relax and think about whatever the conversation was and return back to center and succeed. I don't know. I mean, I just, the value of cannabis just on the level of calming people down is astounding. I don't understand people who want to do business over alcohol. I hate doing business over alcohol. My brain feels stunted, right? Like, I feel like alcohol closes the mind, where cannabis opens the mind.
I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I was just on another podcast recently, and that was something we talked about how all of the people, for the most part, that I know who smoke cannabis are the most intellectual, profound, like interesting people I've ever met, you know? And I'm like, it's just such a shame to me that this plant has such a negative energy. And also, earlier you had mentioned the whole like making it a ritual and smoking and then showering. No, I love that because it's like, with taking in the plant, that's fire, it's earth, it's air, and then you're getting it in water, and it's like, really just cleansing any type of nasty energy you've just accumulated, especially if you put maybe like some lavender in there.
Oh, that's funny that you said lavender. Yeah, that's my go-to.
Yeah. Yeah. You get it.
Yeah.
I think all Latinas, like, we have that shared experience of just like we're just, and it's funny. Someone had recently said this to me, and I guess I had never thought about it. I was on a Clubhouse group, and her name is B, and I'll have to post her information to follow her in the show notes. But she said this thing, and I'd never thought of it like this. And it was like Black and brown and marginalized women, like we have had to hold back our tears and be very strong, and we are not allowed to like show weakness or anger. Like we're supposed to show grace when we're being disrespected. And it's really insulting how, white women can weaponize their tears. And it's just so fucked up because it's like, if you think of what the tears of like, Black and brown women, like they're probably worth their weight in gold. There's magic, that's just so powerful.
It has to be powerful.
Yeah.
X, I never really thought about it that way. And when you consume cannabis, it is something that sets intentions, like we talked about in the lost tapes. It is exactly that. I never even thought about it that way. Because when I do cry, it is very intense. When I pray, it's very intense. Like it's intense. Like it's earth shattering for me, even energy wise. I have to nap because I'm like, whoa, what was that? But then I also, the reason I was chuckling when you were talking about, how white girls can just, they just can just cry so freely. And I remember thinking that in elementary school and getting kind of annoyed. Like I remember just, because I was not allowed to cry. Like I would be given something to cry about. Like we just didn't cry. It just wasn't even a thing. Like I don't even think, when I think back on it, I don't think any of my tias. Like I don't even think about it. Like I can't even remember. And I do, but I was chuckling because I absolutely do remember looking at girls in elementary school crying, going, "What is their problem? Why are they crying so much? Like who cries this much?"
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound racist either. I'm just, it's just.
Reverse racism is real. You can't be racist against the people in power, but I digress. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember thinking that though, going like, "Oh my god, like, geez, there's more drama, and there's like more drama in the classroom than the novellas on TV."
Oh my God. It's so wild how much drama goes down in elementary schools. Like, whew, that's a conversation for another day. But I want to touch base on the fact that, like, you had mentioned, your practice, and I know we had discussed before that you are a Wiccan high priestess. But is that sort of where your ideology is still, or like, what do you consider your practice?
I am very eclectic, to say the least. Like I'm extremely spiritual, and it's just. I mean, like when like formally, like if I go to quote unquote church, for example, then I'll go to a ritual circle, and then if I'm asked to lead one, I know to do that. And I also know. I mean, I'm 44 years old. This has been my main path since high school in terms of like technical. But then it was not enough for me though. That it is not enough for me because I am very spiritual. And so there's just, I'm Native American in addition to being Latina. And that's something that really resonates with me. Nature is where I've always connected. And so for me, it's a mixture. Like I read the Gnostic Gospels, I read the Nag Hammadi texts, right? And like that really even resonated with me. And I'm, on my dad's side of my family, or excuse me, on my mom's side of the family, and some people on my dad's side of the family are Freemasons. And where some people think that that's some weird, conspiracy cult, it really isn't. It's like literally you learn the mysteries. And then as a girl, I was a Job's daughter, and that kind of opened my eyes to, not just charitable work, but just understanding spirituality and, what did it mean to be a Job's daughter, for example, the story of Job and perseverance and, working past adversity. And so, as a child, these are things that I learned. And, it kept me open minded to learning other pathways that were of the right hand, white light always. I'm very cautious of energy. I don't even like to do love spells. Like, that's not how I roll. For me, it's more like self development. If, and my own personal, will, while I'm not like imposing on others. And so that made me just kind of open my mind up to my own higher power and God, even if you will. And I've, experimented with plant medicine outside of cannabis that, not ayahuasca, but San Pedro, for example. And I don't mind sharing that. I am indigenous and my spirituality is nature based. And, cannabis is my main medicine, my main tool, but I've explored others. And, it's opened my mind up to there's just more than one path. So, it's just like, a very eclectic path. I don't even know how else to explain it. It's very peaceful for me and happy.
That's good.
So, despite all of the negative and all of the challenges, I have a very joy filled life. There's a lot of light. I seek a lot of light constantly, and I seek light for my friends, and I learn to seek light even for my enemies, and give that to the light and love and sever connections so that I can just keep, moving forward. And, I use the energy, the tools, the different tools that I've used in the past. Like, I don't like draw proper circles anymore, and I don't sit at my altar and do all the stuff I did like when I was in my 20s versus now where I'm like, I'll smoke a joint and just like I said, like get in the shower, like burn some incense. I'm really big with, candle magic, and I love burning incense, anything that sets intention. And that's just it. And I talked about this before with cannabis and intention setting. Energy is about setting intentions, and you can set good and bad intentions. I mean, the book The Secret is even about that. And so if that means having to cast a circle and calling on certain deities, or writing notes and burning them, or, God forbid, doing evil stuff, it's still about intention. And so for me, it just grew into a very eclectic path. Sorry to just keep going on about that, but it's the first time I've ever explained my spirituality, and because I do believe in, like, I love the story of Jesus, but I also know that it's a deeper story than what we're being told at the surface level. And I also know that it's a story that's brought me closer, like cannabis brought me closer to that. There's so much to it, just historically. And in the Bible, cannabis is in the anointing oil. And it just made me wonder about other things, like the story of Mary Magdalene, for example. Are they really talking about something else? Or what are they talking about? What are they hiding? Everything is always pointed to cannabis, even the goddess Isis. And then there's even crazy stuff that I read, like the Serious Mysteries, which talks about the Dogon tribe in Mali, Africa, that has a 40-year cannabis ceremony. And that book goes down some rabbit hole that does go to ISIS and how cannabis was brought from the Sirius star system to save our planet. And I'm like, well, if an alien visited me tomorrow and told me this stuff, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I buy it. Makes sense, you know? But if I say this to like anybody else, they're like, yeah, you need to be in a hospital locked up. And it's like, no, why don't you come to my library, read what I've read, then come back to me, you know? Don't judge. I wouldn't explain it to a surgeon, or to people how to do heart surgery to a heart surgeon. But I know spirituality and I know cannabis.
I have a lot of thoughts on religion and God and stuff, but I just know that I pray to the universe. That is first and foremost like the thing that matters to me. But I don't know. If someone were to tell me like, yeah, cannabis was brought here by aliens, I'd be like, I buy it. I'm into that now. Now I'm gonna have to dig more into that.
Seriously, read the Serious Mysteries. It was written, I don't know, maybe in the 70s or 80s. the Doggin tribe has been like documenting the Sirius star system, which is not visible to the naked eye. And they didn't have telescopes back when they started documenting the star system. So it's alleged that they had communication with aliens, and then the book just goes down this crazy path. Someone had recommended that I read it, and so I'm like reading it, and then it just takes you down like this deep cannabis spiritual path. And I was like, whoa, you walk out on the other end of the book, you're just like, yeah, that was a journey.
I
And
bet.
yeah, and I read that in my 20s. So, for me, my cannabis spiritual journey has coincided with the day I started using cannabis. And it's the same for a lot of people that I know. And, we're just now in the cannabis space starting to address cannabis spirituality. And I think it's really important, especially addressing it before legalization and, bringing back the sacred, because cannabis is super sacred. I believe wholeheartedly that it is the tree of knowledge. And, I absolutely, there's nothing you can tell me different. I've been believing this since my 20s,
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, no, I'm of the school of thought that it is, because it's just, and mind you, I think that it is possible, like anything, people can totally abuse anything. They can overconsume or not do it with intention. I think that it depends on the person. And, but no, I try to use my cannabis very intentionally, and, it's helping me a lot. I'm really excited because I'm actually getting a vaporizer. Consuming it with like a water pipe has just can't do it anymore.
It hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not the young lass I was once, I years have gotten me. So I think I'm going to try that. I got a PAX. Have you ever played around with one of those?
I do. I just smoke joints. I'm a joint smoker. I used to smoke cigarettes, and I find smoking joints gives me that same satisfaction.
I get it.
So I don't smoke a whole joint to the head though. That's crazy. But it takes me like half a day or so to get through a whole joint. What would that be, like microdosing, I guess, throughout the day.
Yeah, that's cool. I could not do that. I would take it to the head, but I will have to send over your way because I made these intention papers
Oh, I love that.
with the intention of like smoking, smoking with the ancestors. I blessed them with that purpose. So I'll have to send you some of those, especially because you like joints.
I'm not trying to turn a witch conversation into a Bible thumping conversation, but like if you really dissect the Bible and you really talk about intentions, even the Bible says it all began with a word.
Oh, I mean, like Catholics are and Christians as a whole are the biggest hypocrites.
Yes.
They are witches. That whole book is,
It's a spell book. If you analyze it, it's like a guide for life. And then like you get into the Psalms, you're like, wait a minute, this is interesting.
yeah, but they want to pretend like it's not. That's on them. It's whatever. But oh my gosh, this is such an awesome conversation. I love. Thank you so much for taking the time. So beyond that, what is your biggest message to people about cannabis? Like, what is the one thing, if you could change in everyone's mind tomorrow, what would it be?
That cannabis is a very serious spiritual tool. She's a very sacred spiritual tool. And that, it's not a matter of like setting intentions. Like and it's a matter of having a respectful relationship, like, with the plant, and honoring the plant and what the plant can do for good is just so incredible. Like the plant, and I may have spoken about this before in the lost tapes, but what I don't think people really understand is that this plant works on the ego. And like that doesn't mean that you're going to have better therapy because you're thinking about your problems and that you're reflecting on them better. She is an active tool. So she is going, just like when you set intentions, like you read the book The Secret or any other book about setting intentions, and you say, this is what I want to get done. The whole world will change in order to shift and get that done, as will you. And you will do this in such a profound level that people will notice. Like, it's your ego. So, for example, if you are being too arrogant and too proud, that's going to be maximized. People are going to see that. And I'm seeing this in the cannabis space. And I think this is probably the most important message, to where, just the matter of disrespect, where people can't handle the high. So they'll take benzos and drink alcohol and consume cannabis at the same time. Well, good Lord, now you're opening up the door for spirits, because if you're truly a witch or just someone who's spiritual, then you understand that cannabis or that alcohol is called spirits for a reason. And so you're opening up darkness, and then you're smoking cannabis, and you're setting intentions. You have to really work on yourself, and you have to really work on those things that make you a good person and have true integrity, and be who you are in the public and be who you are in private, because cannabis will betray you. You will not be able, like, if you're going to set on this path, and if you want to work with the medicine, if you want to sell the medicine, the plant, or whatever, however you want to work with cannabis, people need to realize that it's not a party. Recreational use is just such a misnomer, because it's not recreational use. It's, some people have argued all use is medicinal use. I don't even think it's that, even, because, again, if we're talking about intentions, sometimes people do buy cannabis just to get high, but it's not a tool just to get high. It's a medicine that at one point in time had medical plant people, medicine doctors. Shaman is, not the most accurate term, but, maybe shamans use them. They're, from Siberia, I believe, is where that term comes from. But however you want to term a master of cannabis, this plant it's a spiritual tool. So you're working with the ego, and if your ego is flawed, be prepared for the lessons that you're going to get. And I think that that's a very appropriate word of caution. I've experienced it. I've had my ass handed to me, embarrassingly. And I'm not talking about falling in front of people. I'm talking about like life shattering lessons, of being too arrogant or too, I mean, I hate to be so Bible thumping sounding again, but, to be completely overwhelmed by sin, by like things that are bad, things that are unclean. Just if you're too greedy, cannabis is going to teach you a harsh lesson about money. If you're too, what's the other one? Lustful. She's going to teach you a lesson about lust. I know it sounds so silly, but again, I've been working with this plant for many, many years. And I'm not myself. I don't consider myself a plant medicine worker. I mean, maybe so. Maybe she does work through me, and I just don't even realize I'm doing this. I was a caregiver, but I work with people who, teach classes that are like on how to use her as a tool. And I have not done that, I should say. This is like my first conversation ever really being public about how I consume cannabis on a spiritual level. But I feel like it's so important now, because, I am a witch, first and foremost. But, even before that, I'm someone who's really concerned about how people are in the world to each other. And we do live, in a time and space that we can and do have an opportunity to be kind. Cannabis isn't a tool for that if we use her correctly. And I've just seen people misuse her to the point of just thinking it's recreational, and it's not. And I've seen, others lose opportunities just being so arrogant or just doing things silly, and just watching, cannabis kind of magnify that. And from years of experience, just seeing the pattern, like, and learning myself to have respect, and to respect myself and how I respect others too. So that way, I am living the golden rule and having integrity. I hope all of that made sense, because it's really hard to explain it in such a short period of time. I write about it in the book, and I have another book coming out after that that will go more into detail. But, to give actual examples, like to give an example, and to go into detail and give an example. This is what happened, and this is the lesson.
And your book will be released. That's so exciting. Where can everyone find it?
The book is actually going to be delayed, but we are going to have a teaser chapter. The book is titled, this is actually the first time I'm even mentioning it, Normal is a Setting. And the reason for that is a very long story, and that's why it's in a book. It's shortened, the original title, and they can find that on normalisasetting.com.
Awesome. I'll include that.
And then people can pre-order the book. But yeah, there's been a delay only because it's just that much work in writing a book, and we are moving from Colorado to Oklahoma, and it pushed the editing back. I actually hired a ghostwriter to write this because I wanted it to be written by someone who had a lot of credibility. So I hired someone who is a former attorney, family law attorney, his researcher from his law firm. He's retired, but they, retired from the law firm and or their law practice to do writing. And his name is Steve Eggleston, and he's a best-selling author. He goes by the Eggman, and that was given to him by Ringo Starr. The book just, it became a larger project than what we expected it to be. We expected it at first to be, just a basic autobiography. I mean, I wouldn't call it basic because it is kind of crazy. Like I've been watching The Queen of the South lately, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, my world wasn't like cocaine cartel queen, but it was definitely its own version of insanity like that. Like, just literally drug war crazy stuff. But, to my mentor being murdered, to me being held hostage by people, to, the possibility of opening up an investigation on that stuff, especially for Ken Gorman's murder. And so then, that's just part of the story. The rest of it is more about, what the original mission was in cannabis and what Ken was fighting for. He got kind of erased in all of this. People were trying to blame everyone in, our inner circle, but I never really thought it was anyone in our inner circle because of what I was going through personally. And this is a chance to correct history, but it's also a chance to talk about what the mission is, and that was a social justice mission, not to legalize and hand it over to the establishment. That's what legalization is now, by the way. This, voting in these revenue-based models, and especially in states where they only hand it off to like 5 marijuana business owners, and then maybe another 20 via lottery, is totally unfair and really unconstitutional. And so I don't know. It's just getting all of this out to get the original mission out is really important. I was really hoping to have the book published by 420, but it's just not happening that way. But I'm happy to at least release the title and the project now to get folks interested in learning about the true history in Colorado and how the dialogue was changed to support a revenue model that was what got legalization pushed, and the revenue model being like a tax and regulate model. But then that shut out the original legacy people. The legacy cannabis people, by the way, are people who were there before regulations. There's folks calling themselves legacy cannabis people who were there right at regulate. Like, when the Cole memo came out and everybody felt like it was safe to grow cannabis, that's when you saw the proliferation of licenses and regulations and what have you. Those aren't legacy people. I mean, people who were growing before then, who are risking their lives and still getting arrested for growing 6 plants or even 12 as a caregiver, not, this. And it helps us go back to that original story. And then that actually brings it back into the spiritual dialogue. And what is cannabis? Why is it surging in popularity? And what is it good for? And I think the timing is perfect. Spiritually, the timing couldn't be any better. We're at a point where there's a bunch of Native American prophecies that are being fulfilled. Our earth, our human race is being threatened by climate change and other issues. That cannabis and hemp can absolutely solve a lot of these issues that our planet is facing, are ego driven, ironically. And I don't think it's a coincidence that cannabis is here to rescue us from our own egos.
And we are in the age of Aquarius now.
Yes, you
so
said it.
Wake up. But oh my gosh, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can everyone go to find you, support you, and keep up with you?
So again, I mentioned the book again, normalisasetting.com. And then also they can find me on all my social media is Larisa Bolivar. So at Larisa Bolivar for LinkedIn. at Larisa Bolivar for Twitter, at Larisa Bolivar for Instagram, and then Larisa Bolivar or Bolivar Hemp Company, which is my skincare line that we're getting ready for a global expansion starting next year, but we're trying to prep for that now while we're fundraising. So any support for that would be amazing.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been such an amazing episode. And as we all continuously wait, Derek Chauvin's verdict has not come in, but no matter what this government, what the justice system says, that man is guilty. I think that we should all be gentle with ourselves. We should all hold space for ourselves. Back off your Black friends right now because they're hurting. Just hold space for your Black friends right now. They're feeling a lot right now. And shit's heavy. I just want everyone to know that no matter what, he is guilty. Just as the legal process in this country is racist as fuck, the history of making this plant is illegal. And I hope that in the future, our eyes are open to a lot more things that need to change. Be good to yourself, protect your neck. And I look forward to chatting with you next Tuesday. Thanks for listening to Tutia Bruja. Bye.